Hello there and welcome. Today we're going to take a look at Mercedes with the recent patch that has fixed development, contracts, and also the ERS penalty issue. And the idea here is very simple. We're going to take Mercedes and we're going to go through how you can dominate with them, reach that goal of second and above, and potentially also beat Red Bull and get that championship. Now, keep in mind that this is still an early patch, so the game might have changed a little bit by the time you watch this. But if you enjoy this video, please like, subscribe, and if you have any questions, anything like that, feel free to ask as we go. And yeah, that's about it. Let's just jump straight in. So with Mercedes, you are expected to come second and above. However, they have given you the arguably fourth best car to accomplish this, which is going to make it a little bit more difficult. Now, you also start out with both Russell and Hamilton being negative mentality, which of course affects their performance, but that is not really a huge issue, and we'll get into how you can fix that a little bit later. For now, though, what we're going to do first is get started on developing the car, and we're going to start with the underfloor, like we usually do. Underfloor is just the best thing I feel to do early on. We're going to invest all of our CFD time on it. Now, the reason why I'm investing all CFD time in one part is straight up because the CFD does boost the stats of the part slightly. However, the biggest gain that you're going to get is actually when you make the second edition of this part, which we'll get into a little bit later. But that is why we're using all of our CFD in one part to get a larger boost for one piece, so we only have to make one piece twice, rather than, say, split it between 2 or 3 parts, which would force us to make them 2 or basically 2 or 3 extra, which not only would be expensive, but it would also have it would also kind of lose a little bit of performance due to the fact that that buff gets spread across several parts. And the way that expertise works is that the lower the expertise, the quicker it goes up. So as we are kind of at our lowest expertise right now on our underfloor, we want to take advantage of the CFD buffs as much as possible. Hence why we are putting everything in, taking advantage of basically 2 systems to get the biggest gain we can at a quick pace. Now we're going to use rush development here. Keep in mind, if you are playing Create a Team, this strategy will not work. And the reason is very simple. When you play one of the 10 original teams, you have your basically full cost cap here, 96 million. However, if you play Create a Team, you'll be closer to 60 million, and you will not have the money to use rush development. It's just not going to be worth it. So do not rush if you are playing Create a Team. You can still follow the same development strategy, just not rush the parts. Secondly, we're going to get started on the chassis, as the chassis is a huge source of both top speed and also cornering. And you can kind of see it here. We get a decent chunk of top speed, we get a decent amount of cornering, and we do lose some DRS effectiveness and some engine cooling. But the engine cooling we can get back on the side pod, which we're going to do in a second. And DRS effectiveness doesn't seem that important this year. The reason why I'm saying it is that drivers are far more aggressive in getting the overtakes done in corners. You're not seeing too many overtakes, I'd say, on the straights, and even then you can use energy to get them done. So I'd rather just focus on pure pace and get close to the car in front and maybe use energy to overtake them. But even that might be a little bit, risky. Now keep in mind, DRS effectiveness does, in theory, help you quite a bit in quali as you open the DRS flap. But there is a positive and negative of this. If you have high DRS effectiveness, you might qualify way higher than you're supposed to, and immediately the drivers will fall backwards because they don't have the pace without DRS, and as a result, you'll lose some confidence. By having our DRS effectiveness low, we're also kind of qualifying a little bit worse, but on the flip side, we should be able to easily overtake the cars in front, and that is going to allow us to get an early confidence boost for our drivers. So that is the idea of this strategy. Is it the best one? We'll have to see. I might be doing things wrong with the DRS efficiency, but for now, it has proven to work, which is why I'm doing it. Next up, we're going to get the side pod rolling, and that is where we're going to get that cooling back. We're just going to focus on engine cooling and airflow middle. As you can see, we get a 13% cooling. We'll lose about 3% or so from the chassis, so we're still going to have a decent chunk of engine cooling, which is going to be important to make sure that we don't wear out our components too fast and pick up faults. We're also, again, here going to get a decent chunk of cornering, which is good. And lastly, we're going to do the suspension. And here we're actually going to focus on tire preservation and airflow front, as well as the low speed downforce. And as you've seen it, we're focused on basically cornering, no top speed so far, but we are most likely going to make some pieces a little bit later in the season where we get some of that top speed we're losing now back, so don't worry about that. We're also going to want to minimize lifespan on everything, with the exception of maybe the front and rear wing. And the reason for this is quite simple. Lifespan is still a huge source of performance. So if you don't like to take advantage of that, you don't need to. But putting lifespan to minimum is basically several designs worth of performance gained from, spending a little bit more money, making more pieces. And with the cost cap that we have, the expense of making those pieces is not going to bankrupt us. We're still going to be perfectly fine throughout this year. Now, next up, I'm going to go to Bahrain, and I'm going to talk a little bit about quali, race tips, race weekend, basically over what you should be thinking of there. And generally here, you can potentially simulate Bahrain, you can potentially simulate Jeddah. And the reason why I'm saying this is very simply the fact that we're going to get our underfloor done by Jeddah, but we're going to make another one. We're also going to get our chassis done. And basically, we're going to have both of those components for one car by the time we go into Australia. We're basically going to have all 4 new components on one car, maybe both if you rush them. And basically by Australia is when we expect to be a little bit more competitive. So if you want, you can simulate Bahrain, you can simulate Arabia or Jeddah. But do keep in mind that we do have a mentality issue currently with Hamilton and Russell. So taking manual control in order to ensure you get a little bit of a better result might be worth it due to that. Next up, we're going to go to sponsor negotiation, and then we're going to head into the race weekend. Now, for the sponsor negotiation here, we have 1 upfront package as well as 2 engagement packages. And honestly, I don't like engagement packages, and I'm going to go over why right now. So the potential funding from engagement is, in this case, almost 50 million. But if you want to have this funding paid out, you're going to have to debuff yourself. You're going to have to debuff either your drivers, your staff, or your buildings. And with an engagement target of 47 million, that is going to be a lot of debuffs, and I'm going to go over just how harsh that's going to be in a second. So for now, we're going to pick the upfront package, although it has the least funding. We lose out on about 14 million, but it's going to give us 27 million to start off with, and this is going to be plenty to develop our car over the course of the season, which is why we're going with it. Secondly, we'll be picking ourselves some of these race goal or race day fundings, because they are basically one of the easiest ways of getting money. And we are going to be outperforming the car, most likely. So race day funding is a great source of getting, financial boosts. And we're actually just going to go ahead and pick all of them here, because in our case, we got some pretty good ones. And with that, we've kept our engagement around 10, 11 million. We get 30 million up front, and we get 53 million through race day. And the reason why race day is so good is, again, the way that the game calculates how good your car is right now is basically an average of every stat. And what I mean by this is that we're 7th overall, but if we were to say become 1st in cornering, medium speed, and high speed, we'd probably still be just 7th or maybe even just 5th, because the game takes every single stat and averages them to come up with your performance. With that, we can get sponsor goals that are basically like get on the podium and we'll pay you, extra. And we'll be taking full advantage of that in the series to get a little bit extra money. And this is something you can do with your own creative teams. It's something you can do with your own your own Mercedes challenge. And here's the interesting part. We had 10 million worth of engagement, and we need to whip up 3,000 points. So if we had 50 million, you can imagine that this will probably be a little bit more. I don't think it would be the full 15,000 points needed. We're probably closer to 7, 8, maybe 9,000 points. And that is still going to be huge. And again, by choosing less engagement, we can actually pick some of these buffs that are better for us. And that's kind of what we're going with here. We're just going to do factory adverts. It doesn't seem to slow down your development too much in terms of making parts. So it's not really a huge deal. We're also going to have our technical chief do a fuel advert here. But we're not going to be getting a lot of money from engagement this year. We're going to be getting a lot of money from our race goals. Now, with that said, we can now head into Bahrain. And mentality is still going to be a little bit of a concern. And there is a couple of ways to fix this. We do have staff, the team hub, can boost mentality. We also have the memorabilia room, which can boost mentality, and we're going to start upgrading these. In particular, we're going to get the team hub upgraded, and we're also going to go ahead and get the memorabilia room upgraded, as these are going to be huge over the course of this season. Now, keep in mind, we can do helipad and tour center too, but we're going to wait with getting started on them for one very simple reason. If we take a look at Hamilton now and his mentality, you can see that he is happy with the fact that we started a facility upgrade. This means that if we wait with upgrading our other two, the helipad and the tour center, we can actually get this buff. This is a temporary buff, by the way. We can get this buff around a time where our car is actually more competitive. So we can wait until we get to Australia. We can wait until we have all 6 pieces on the car if you want to. and then we can make a little bit of a better buff to bring it up to enthusiastic. And if we do, he's going to get very close to 100 overall. He's going to be a little bit behind in accuracy because it starts low. But cornering, braking, reactions, a lot of these are going to be very close, if not 100 straight up for Hamilton. And again, Russell's going to get close in that same way, which is why we want to manage mentality. Secondly, we also want to get off to a flying start in Australia or in Japan because of the fact that Verstappen and Red Bull starts with a positive mentality. And after a couple of race wins, I can imagine he would be enthusiastic, which is going to make him a really, really hard adversary to deal with. So we do need to take that into account as well. For now, though, we're going to head into the first race weekend, and we'll talk a little bit about qualifying, the race strategy planner, and generally just what you can do during the race weekend to make your experience a little bit better. So just to give you an idea of why we picked the sponsor goal, particularly with the race reward, as you can see, our reward for getting 8th or higher at the moment is 1.1 million. And if we get 6th or higher with Hamilton, another 1.1 million. Again, with a couple of upgrades, getting this should be fairly easily. And again, over the course of a year, getting 2.2 million times 24, it's going to give us an additional just straight up 50 million in race rewards. That is going to be quite huge for our finances. Now, currently when you simulate practice, there is either a bug or a change this year that means that the AI is not really respecting the setups that you make, meaning that if you want your drivers to have the setup that you have set up, you're actually going to have to either do the third practice session because you need to do a session manually, or you need to just do the setup like I'm doing before quali, and then use that setup to, further improve. It's kind of going to be probably a little bit of a hard thing to do in most cases, but in our case here, we basically are going to be doing the first quali ourselves. And there is a reason why I would recommend you doing your qualis manually. When you sim, there seems to be a fairly odd chance, or rather fairly decent chance, that you will qualify lower than if you did your qualis manually. And the second reason why we want to do our manual qualis is because of tires. Each race weekend, you get a decent amount of tires, or rather a set amount of tires, but the AI will have a tendency to straight up use only fresh tires for every qualifier. So Q1, new set of fresh tires, Q2, new set of fresh tires, and basically leave you with one or even no sets of fresh tires for the race weekend itself. And in particular in Bahrain here, the tires are incredibly important. The soft tires are 5/10 quicker than the mediums from the get-go, if I remember correctly. And this is a fact. The soft tires are going to be faster than the mediums for the entire life cycle. So keep that in mind. The soft tires are incredibly powerful around here, hence why it's important for us to actually keep 1 or 2 fresh sets. Generally here in Bahrain, we want to have 2 fresh sets for the race itself, and manual qualifying is the way to go if you want to save tires. So the way to save tires, just to be absolutely clear, is that after you've done your first run in Q1 and got them through, you just pick those same old used tires. They're not really losing a lot of performance, so it's perfectly fine to use these for your Q2 run, and if needed, your first run in Q3. But generally in Q3, it's fine to pick a new set. You get one for free. But yeah, definitely if you can get through Q2 with a fresh set, that would be amazing. Oh, sorry, with the old set, that would be amazing. If you have to use a fresh set, use it for your first run in Q3, and then, maybe use a new set if you need to. But generally here also, you'll see that we've done way better now in Q2 than we did in Q1. And again, this is due to a little bit of the confidence. So we started out pretty poor. We're getting better. And again, just do quali yourself to manage tires. That's literally the only reason why we're manually doing this. You will also perform a little bit better doing it manually rather than allowing the AI to take control. So it's those two reasons. Save tires, and you most likely perform a lot better than the AI. And a general rule of thumb here, send your cars out immediately. They'll mostly have free reign there. There's some tracks where they might get stuck like China or slow down. But generally, sending your cars out immediately is a good way to get some easy headway. And if you need to, around the 6-minute mark on the clock, 6:30-second mark, you can usually get a completely clean run in before every other team does their final runs. So 6 minutes, 6:30 left on the clock, do your second run, and you usually have the track to yourself. If you make it through both qualies on just one set of tire, that's perfectly fine to do one new set of tires here, or basically use a new set of tires for Q3. And here too, we're going to aim at doing 2 runs. One for building confidence, the initial run, and then probably another run around the 6-minute mark. And if you kind of miss out on that, try and just see if you can find a good window to slot into after about half the cars have left the pits for the final run. Now, for your first couple races here, you're going to be qualifying 7th or 8th or maybe 9th if you have a bad run in Q3, like Hamilton did. Ended up setting him out at the wrong time, which can happen. It's not a big deal. You just have to try your best in the race to make up for it. And as I mentioned here, strategy planner is going to be a huge part of your races this year. And what I recommend is just sitting down and playing around with it, mess around a little bit before each race to see if you can find a better strategy than what is put up here. And the strategy planner is fairly accurate when it comes to the estimated race time, so you can definitely use this to find a faster one. And a new thing this year is that the AI will try and find a good strategy for you straight up based on how many, or rather which tires you have available, as you can kind of see that it's done here. So do keep that in mind as well. The AI will try and help you out a little bit. And in our case here, we can make a strategy that is slightly faster by just burning the medium tire immediately. It's kind of good because it's going to be a little bit faster, particularly for the first 5 laps, than running a light soft. Basically, the idea behind light softs is that they're quick because they are slow in the beginning, but faster than the remaining cars for basically the second 2/3 of its life cycle. So you're going to lose out at the start, but you're going to be getting that back and more once you actually, once the other cars have worn down their tires a little bit. There's actually a really, really good strategy around here because of the fact that the other teams will be wearing down the tires. And we'll be doing a little bit of a split strategy here just to be on the safe side. And that should allow us to have no problems with getting in the points there, at least get 7th and 8th. Maybe try and snatch 6th, 5th, something like that. Because 7th and 8th is kind of what is expected of us. Now, also keep in mind that when you run lights off towards the end of its life, you can run attack before you pit and get a little bit of an even extra time saver in there. So again, just mess around with the strategy. You can also, this is going to probably be something you can do if you are really, really into it. You can actually check the expected compound performance. So a soft tire here, average laps are 32.3, mediums 32.8, or rather 32.9, which means that you have almost 6/10 of advantage. We take that 6/10 and we split it on the difference here, which is 900 minus 600, which leaves us with 300s. 300 split on 6/10 is basically 20. Which tells us that a soft tire and a medium tire run at the same intensity will be equal in pace after 20 laps. Softs hold an advantage of the mediums for 20 laps here. And again, it's that sort of calculation you can do to help you with your tire choices. But it's up to you if you want to do that. It's pretty, that's when you're getting a little bit maybe too into it. But it is a tool you can take advantage of to know exactly which tires are the best, what can I actually expect from this tire. And as you can see, because of the fact that the soft tires are almost 6/10 faster than the mediums, running them light isn't a loss really. And if you are running against another car on a soft tire, you'll get that time back towards the end of your stint. So I wouldn't be too worried. With that though, let's jump into the race itself. And I'll tell you a couple of things that's going to make your life a little bit easier in terms of avoiding crashes and basically spending a lot of money on repairing your car. So at race start here, we are going to have a couple of options available to us. For Hamilton here, we've actually forgot to do this. You should set this up at the race start though, like push, deploy, everything. Except for Russell here, we're trying to take care of the tire, so running him light isn't actually a bad thing. But what you should be doing is put on rarely defend and overtake aggression. And what does this do? So low overtake aggression lowers your chance of overtake, but with how aggressive the AI is with overtaking anyways this year, we haven't really struggled getting past the car in front. On the positive side, risk of spin lockups get lessened, and the risk of corner collisions also go down. So you have less risk of crashing just straight up by putting this low. And if you are struggling with overtaking a car in front, just turn it up for that overtake. Keeping it low will in general, avoid a lot of negative incidents for you. And it's same here with defend. You're going to be, less defensive against overtakes, but the AI is super aggressive with them anyway. So even if you run always defend, which you shouldn't, unless you're looking to actually slow down the car behind you, because basically you can be 2-3 seconds slower a lap with it on. You could use neutral, but generally just run rally defend here to, again, lessen that risk of crashing. That's genuinely why we do it. Now, avoid high-risk curbs and driving clean air can be used conditionally. if your powertrain has suffered damage, basically your engine, your gearbox, or your ERS, you can avoid high risk curbs, as that will lessen the chance of it getting worse. But in general, here it's going to cost you 2 to 3 tenths a lap, so not really worth it unless you really need it to avoid the powertrain damage. Driving clean air is another one, which basically have you drive offline. You're no longer trying to take advantage of slipstream, you drive offline. It's going to lower your powertrain wear and temperature, same for the tires, but it's going to make you quite a bit slower, so unless you really, really need to cool down your stuff, I wouldn't recommend using it. That's generally it for basically the race tips here. Just play your strategy to the best that you can, and take advantage of these two to avoid crashing. With a season with Behrman and Hauger, by taking advantage of this, I had them just crash once each for the course of the season, while others might have them basically ruin the entire team come halfway through the season due to a multitude of crashes. So it is something to keep in mind, that you can take advantage of driver settings like this to avoid incidents. And again, other than that, there isn't really too much to say about race pace. Take advantage of your strategy. Keep an eye on your temperatures here that they don't go over the maximum. It's perfectly fine to run a little bit overheated. The second you go over the maximum temperature, that is when they really, really start losing durability. As long as you pay attention to that, you should have an advantage. Yeah, other than that, this first race, the goal here is just 7th and 8th really for us. So there isn't really anything too much on the table. We might try to get 6th and 7th here because of the fact that Sainz had an incident. But for your first couple of races, 7th and 8th is plenty to go with, and that should be your goal. So I want to show you what I mean in Bahrain by taking care of our tires in particular. So in our case, Alonso's actually overtaking us, but as you can see, he's used 48% of his tires, 41, 44, 39. By the first 10 laps, they basically used up this first stint already, and they're going to have to pit. Like, we might be a pit stop behind Verstappen and Perez and Leclerc, but they're basically already in a position where they have a vastly superior car, so they should be that far ahead if they've been going full push on a soft tire for the first stint. Now, if we look at Alonso here, we are still keeping up with him, and basically, we now have a huge tire advantage that we can translate into, pitting later than him, pushing it towards the end, and generally just having a faster stint here. And the funny thing is, by running light, you can even potentially hold up other cars like Verstappen. So do keep that in mind. There is other things that you can do with running light that allows you to kind of take advantage of the fact that you're running longer. You can slow down the car behind, even if he's on fresher tires, if you have your teammates running side by side. But now that we don't really need to overtake Alonso, he is not really super quick compared to us. But with DRS, with the layout of this track, it's kind of hard really to actually create a gap where we can actually get away from him. But with us now running 1-2, that's going to be a lot easier. Now we've finally reached Hamilton's first pit stop, and we're going to be putting him on the light tires. Now in this game, they've actually done a change to how the pit stops work in a positive manner, I'd say. We can just keep Hamilton on full attack, and as he now pits, he's going to come out with a light tire setup, which is going to be really, really good. Unfortunately for us though, we do have a pit stop error that is going to cause some issues there. We lost about 5-6 seconds there on the pit stop itself. And as you can see, we would have come out ahead of Alonso most likely if we didn't have that problem. But we just have nothing to do here. We're going to have to try and make that back. This is also a point now where we can start going full attack on Russell, because he's going to enter his pit window very soon. And with that, we can kind of see the difference in lap times. Russell's running at 39 right now, Stroll running 40s. But the cars on the fresher tires are going to be fairly quick because they're kind of pushing them a little bit. But with us going aggressive, we should be seeing at least slightly better lap times at the moment. 38, not great, but again, that's what our car is capable of. It's basically the same as Tsunoda on fresh tires. So it's still looking very, very promising. We now have Russell entering the pit stop, and he is probably far enough ahead here that he might come out ahead of Alonso and Hamilton. Currently, Alonso is being a little bit of a nuisance, honestly, and we might want to try and get away from him. We're actually a little bit slow then, we come out behind. But we're going to be running attack, so we'll probably catch up. Yeah, basically, we're still kind of running where we're expected to be. We got away from Tsunoda. Sainz is becoming a little bit of danger here. He's going to have to pit probably twice if he keeps on pushing like this. Now, another tip that I have this year is make sure to use your ERS in a good way. And I kind of want to show this here with this lap from Russell. The last lap was a 37 blank from Russell here as he is fighting with Alonso. But with the ERS now on deploy, you'll be seeing that Russell will be able to easily get away from Alonso here and probably set a new personal best lap time. ERS is incredibly powerful this year, so if you really are struggling with cars just sticking to you, you're losing time fighting, just go ahead and use that ERS to create a gap. And as you can see, we've already created almost a 4-second gap last lap at 34.9. So the ERS, although it's probably just usable for 1 or 2 laps in most case scenarios, is an incredibly powerful tool compared to last year. You would generally not see improvements of the 3 or 4 second order of magnitude from purely ERS usage. But kind of where we want to be now, we have 1 pit stop remaining. We're running 6th and 7th, and everyone behind us, with the exception of Sainz, needs to still pit. Sainz is good half a minute behind us, so we should still be able to take it a little bit slow, pit, and come out ahead of him. But you kind of get the idea here. We'd probably end up 6th and 7th if not for this. The other cars in front here are still going to be quite a lot quicker. Potentially we could catch Piastri, but 6 seconds is still a little bit too much for our car. So after our final pit stops here, we come out in 6th and 7th, and we do have Sainz just behind us. We have 4 seconds up to Piastri, and as you can see, they've all already used a lot of their tires. And that is kind of the advantage we're going to be pushing for these last 17 laps. We are going to allow ourselves to run a little bit slower here at the start of the stint to catch up to them towards the end. And we might even have Sainz, who is pushing his tires way more than we are, overtake us and kind of help us along if we can stay within that DRS zone. Basically, at the start of the stint, we're going to be a little bit slower, take advantage of other cars' tires with the DRS, and then come back and catch up to them by the end. We're getting close to the end here, and this is basically when the fun starts, the last 7 laps. So around here, you can expect to lose 5-6% when you go full attack on your soft tires. What does this mean? The last 7 laps, 7 times 5, we're expected to lose about 35%, meaning that we can, at this point, with Hamilton at the very least, start being a little bit aggressive and try and chase down Piastri. We're also going to we're going to wait 1 more lap for Russell just to be on the safe side. We're also going to want Hamilton to kind of dislodge Sainz here, not give him DRS. And if we can do that, then Russell's going to have a way easier time catching up to, well, in this case, Sainz, as you can kind of see ERS being very powerful as we just got fastest lap. Now, with just 6 laps remaining, we can now also have Russell go on the offensive. And with that, we are going to be trying now to catch the cars ahead. Now, of course, crashes like this can potentially be an issue for you. Safety cars, things like that. Kind of hard to expect. But I think we're safe in this case. Yeah, that's just a lie tape that not going to be a safety car. Safety cars can really easily destroy this strategy because of the fact that we are kind of waiting with using our, power, if you will, till the last couple of laps. But generally, it's a good strategy for when you are the quote-unquote weaker team and need to catch up. Currently, we're doing the same kind of laps as Piastri. And honestly, he's taking well care of his medium soft tires here. We don't really have a huge advantage. He's definitely been slowing down a little bit for the last couple of laps. But we are catching him. And that's the important part here. We are just 1.5 seconds behind. We're going to catch Piastri and potentially even Perez. Because remember, ERS is incredibly powerful. We do need to probably save a little bit of fuel, which we'll do running behind the car in front. For Russell, we'll just do it at the same time so we don't forget. But for Hamilton here, if we can clear Piastri, then we definitely also have a chance of getting Perez in that same kind of swell move. And even with that very, very bad DRS that we have now, we can still get the overtake done. And even if it gets worse, it's not going to be a huge issue. 2 seconds now up to Perez, 3 laps to go. It is still on. And here we're just going to try and deploy a little bit of energy for Hamilton, because fighting with Piastri is going to cost a lot of time. That is also something that is kind of new with this game compared to last year's. Because the fights are more aggressive, there's more pushing and crowding of track, you are playing it way more risky in the sense that if you are fighting cars, you are going to be losing a lot of time. So it's important to manage your ERS this year, use it to create those gaps where the car, the car behind can't really take advantage of the DRS anymore. And particularly in Bahrain, I don't really recommend using energy down the main straight. What you want to do is actually get the overtake done, going into that final corner, and then use energy. And as you can see here, Perez has re-overtaken us, which honestly isn't a huge deal. But we're about to head into the final lap, so we're going to have to use energy anyways. So at this point, we're just going to go for the overtake. Probably get it done here on this straight, because again, ERS is just... It's just a zoom button right now. Probably not going to be enough here to create the gap that we're looking for. And honestly, we should probably wait until next lap to really push. For us, although, we need to do it now. We've actually done it last. You can kind of get the idea here. Even with a car that isn't supposed to get here, with the correct strategy, we can kind of pull it off. And even if Perez gets the overtake done here now, we'll be able to use energy to keep up with him. And then we can just get the overtake done on that same place we did last time. Shouldn't be a big deal. And once we get that overtake done, that should be us securing a 4th place, which would be a little bit better than what we anticipate. And it's kind of the same thing here for Russell. Get that overtake done into on the straight. And for Hamilton here, it was actually a little bit too slow. So we actually kind of lost out there, because now they're pushing too. So we did actually end up going for the overtake on the wrong lap for both cars. But that is, again, something that can happen. Just a poorly timed execute on my side. And now you know and can do it better. But 5th and 8th here in the first race isn't terrible. And you are still going to need upgrades before you can fight the, Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris. But for this, at the start, you can potentially vie for a 4th place. A little bit disappointing here that we failed. But you get the idea. With the right strategy, you can still have a good start to the season, which means that once you get your upgrades, dominating is going to become a lot simpler. Keep also in mind here, I did go a little bit too quick there. Hamilton had that huge negative. Apparently, we're not getting paid out this race because they don't believe in us. Hamilton still had that huge delay on the pit stop. If we didn't have that 6-second delay, then we definitely would have beaten Perez. Now, also, the fact that we have a good result here is going to boost their personal race results, team race result. That's going to help a little bit with the mentality, which is why it is important to get a good qualifying result, a good race result. And the best way to do that is to take manual control of these first 2 races, where you are a little bit weaker than basically the teams around you. So with that said, I am going to sim Jeddah, but if you want the mentality boost, you can do it manually yourself. Now, after we get our new underfloor, we're actually going to go ahead and manufacture it in a rush order, so we can get it before Melbourne. Honestly, we don't need to actually rush it, we can do normal. And the idea here is very simple. We're going to be using this new underfloor for at least a couple of races, because what we want to do today is actually get started on that front wing, because we now have a new ATR period. And since we need to do everything over, 2 periods, sacrificing 5 days on the underfloor is acceptable, because the front wing is going to give us a huge boost to our low speed cornering. And again, this boost is going to be quite substantial once we place every single slider in a good spot. As you can see, 109, that's enough to make us the best low speed cornering team. So front wing, very important. You can do a couple of tugs here to the right, just to make them last 2 to 4 races, right? Just 1 to 3, or 1 to 2 even. And that's going to save a lot of money, not really lose you a lot of performance, so it's going to be worth it. And again, remember, we're going to do another front wing after this, which is going to get rid of most of these malices. So it's still perfectly fine to do it like this, and we are going to rush it with as many engineers and, the rush one, because we can. If you cannot, you're just going to have to run normal. But generally, this is going to be a good enough wing that will get it by Suzuka. Now, again, also, because we're doing it like this, we are going to be a little bit slow on that second underfloor, but the second underfloor isn't going to be a huge boost, so it's actually perfectly fine. We are going to be, as I said, just simming through Jeddah here, because it's just easier, but we're going to be jumping onto that chassis we're getting afterwards and getting started on the underfloor. So after simulating Jeddah here, we actually end up where we are, expected, 7th and 8th. We still don't have any upgrades. That's kind of what you can expect from just simulating. Scary part now is going to be to see if we actually picked up any issues, because you usually will, as our design is complete, you usually will pick up this, a minor failure to the gearbox, and also at least a front wing failure, so not too bad. But that is one of the problems with simulating, is that it's very easy to pick up minor faults, which is going to slow you down and also force you to use more components. So doing the races manually just to avoid that is kind of worth it just from that perspective. Now, we can rush this and get one of them ready for Melbourne, but we'll only have one. We're just going to do our chassis normally. After that, as I mentioned, at this point is when you do another underfloor. And again, we're just going to do the same sliders that we did for the first one. And for this one here, we have minimized the loss of dirty air tolerance. We minimized the top speed. and we gain a little bit more in terms of our, well, top speed gains. You could, of course, go for gaining some top speed here, but the amount is so low that I'd rather take the cornering. And again, here, we just rush it. We put an extra engineer on it, and we'll have this in 20 days. So if we rush it, we can actually have an upgraded floor for Suzuka. And that's kind of what we are aiming for here. By Suzuka, we want to have most components on the car, with the exception of that rear wing. Now, we're going to get 2 more designs done the day after, which is the side pod. And here's where you might run into some problem with the manufacturing if you are a low rated team. But luckily for us, we are still fine. And we're going to rush these side pods because we want to get them for the race. And we're going to do the same for the suspension. We're going to rush them and then we'll just have them in time for Melbourne, which means already there, we are going to be somewhat more competitive. Of course, only one of our cars is going to get the chassis upgrade, but with 3 upgrades on both cars, it's going to be looking a lot more promising. Now, with the rear wing here, we're going to be focusing on 2 things, top speed and medium speed cornering. But once again, going to be sacrificing our DRS effectiveness, going to be sacrificing a little bit of our cornering ability. But again, the medium speed cornering now is generally mostly gained just from the rear wing. It's going to be one of your better sources, as well as the top speed. And of course, we can lower the wear here, but also like we did with the front wing, we want to probably do a couple of tags there just to save a little bit of money. Now, we are going to be using CFD time on the next rear wing we make. So this one isn't actually super important to get, but it still is something that would be nice to have. Now, since we're getting the front wing in 13 days, we are going to be moving engineers over to the rear wing once that is done. But we can also check our calendar here and see when is the front wing supposed to be done. And you can see here, it's supposed to be done basically once we're done with Australia. So we can probably move it at least 3-6. We'd need 3 days to make each. So move it until 30th of March, which means that we can lose probably 6 days on it and still be fine, which might allow us to move that rear wing a little bit forwards. That is kind of what we're going to try and do now. Go in here, we're going to take 6 days off this front wing. 30th of March is what we said, isn't it? Like so. And with that, we can now do this, which gives us that on the 31st, which means we're going to have to rush a rear wing. But it means that by Suzuka, we're going to have a completely new car. Now, we are going to need to do another front wing design after this one is done. But the front wing itself is so powerful that it's perfectly fine to do it like this. So we can actually get basically a new car come the race in Suzuka. And again, this is kind of what we're focusing on here, just developing the car as quickly as possible in order to dominate. Now, we're going to allow time to pass until we get to Australia, and then we're going to put our new car together. And then we'll see exactly how it measures up compared to some of the other cars on the grid. Now, the underfloor has been manufactured here, and we're going to get a couple of other manufacturing problems. A couple of other manufacturing jobs done. And we're going to go one more day here, just so we can make sure that the AI put their parts on the car. And as you can see, 99777. And if we go now into the warehouse, and we're going to put the chassis on Hamilton's car. Hamilton is the one that gets priority. He has been performing the best. Side pod on each car. Underfloor on each car. And also, that's my bad, went back a little bit too far. Suspension on each car. And if we go back now to the estimation here, let's take a look at car 2, which is Hamilton. As you can see here, we're only behind Hamilton in high speed for Russell. And we are actually we're actually not only behind. It's kind of weird, that one. But yeah, we now have a domination in medium and high speed. We also have the best, almost the best tire preservation, at least very good. Good cooling. We have lost some DRS effectiveness, but it's not really a huge deal. And once we get that front wing and rear wing, we're definitely going to be the cornering champions. Now, you can actually also check how your car is expected to perform at certain races. So in Japan, we're supposed to be first. Basically here, the top speed cornering is kind of what we need here. So we're still a little bit, gimped, if you will. But already here, we should be performing a lot better in Australia, as we now have the best high-speed car on the grid. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the upgrade for Russell in time, but he's still going to probably perform a lot better than he did in the last race. Let's head in and see how we do. So in Australia, with the new upgrades here for Hamilton, he has put it on pole ahead of Norris, and apparently Verstappen had a pretty bad one here, but he might have beat us, let's be perfectly honest, as he has summoned the devil. Russell did not really have any huge gains there in quali, and I think that's a combination of the fact that he is still lacking a little bit of that high-speed cornering and also a little bit of the top speed that the chassis has provided. So say, double whammy, chassis is incredibly important here. And for Hamilton, the high-speed gain has definitely outweighed the, the loss of top speed, if you will. So even if this track benefits from both of them, it seems like it benefits more from the high-speed cornering rather than the top speed as it is. And again, you get a huge amount of both of those from the chassis, which kind of explains why Russell is as slow as he was. Now on this track, we're going to be setting up a strategy, and I think with us being on pole, we're going to go with a light soft to start off with. Then we go onto the wet tires. I'm just joking. We're going to go on a full attack medium. Kind of very similar here to what we did in Bahrain. And it's not necessarily going to be a lot faster than doing this, for instance. But it's basically just us taking care of the tires. And again, we can, towards the end of these things, go, more aggressive to compensate for the lack of time. And again, we're going to be gaining time on everyone. And then we can go standard, aggressive. You can actually ramp it up if you feel like it. We're just going to go attack to make it easy. So this is what we'll do for Hamilton. And for Russell, who actually starts a little bit further down the order, we could try a one-stopper. It's not necessarily a terrible idea around here. But I think what we do is we start in the mediums, we go attack, we try and make up some places with that. And we go on to a couple of lighter stints towards the end. And as you can see here, this is about 12 seconds faster than base strategies, 5 seconds faster than what we suggested with the one-stopper. And again, we have a lot of tire wear available to us in case we have incidents, or if we don't, we can just go attack towards the end of the stint and kind of get a little bit extra time from that. So that is going to be the plan here. And just like last time, we are going to be setting this up properly this time. And with that, we'll head into the race. And again, I would recommend that you set the driver settings for low overtake aggression to never defend, just because it avoids so many incidents. Yeah, Hamilton on pole in Australia. Bit of a shame that we couldn't get the chassis ready there for Russell. But considering the fact we're going to have new front wings, and also the chassis for Russell come the next race, I think we're going to have a loads better time there. So let's see here what Hamilton can do. Already creating quite a significant gap there to Perez, but that is due to Perez having a little bit of damage as well. But we're definitely going to be quick around here. Let's see if we can hold on to this pole and get our race win already in the third race of the season. So even with the upgrades, we were unfortunately not super competitive here with Hamilton, and one of the reasons is the fact that we picked up yet another slow pit stop for him. It did get him stuck in traffic, and that traffic probably held him up for a good 10 seconds. So just bad race strategy from my side, but at least the upgrades are seemingly making us a little bit faster. And I also did forget to do what I said in the beginning, which is to start doing some upgrades on the helipad, the tour center, Mobile room, and also the team hub, which is still being upgraded and done in 5 days, in order to try and give our drivers a little bit of that extra boost from facility upgrades. And it has brought them up to a overall positive mentality, and that gets us closer to, a perfect race pace. So that is good. We're going to keep on upgrading things as we go, and Russell is kind of getting a little bit negative here because, let's be perfectly honest, he does not have the best car. Still lacking a couple of components. But once we get that second underflow done, we'll get at least one of those for Suzuka. The front wings we'll get for both cars. The rear wings we'll also get for both cars. And then we'll be a little bit more competitive and probably start doing a couple of other designs as well. Even if we do that, though, it's not going to speed things up. So what we'll do here in terms of the other design, and again, this is just for development's sake. What we are going to do is actually do the opposite of what we did with the chassis initially. We're going to be focusing the RS Delta engine cooling in order to boost the expertise of these a little bit, because that'll allow us to sacrifice that expertise for drag reduction and airflow middle. It's just a little bit though, it's nothing huge. So we're going to do one design like this, and then one design like we did last time, and then the third one, or the fourth one even, is actually going to be the design we put on the car. So this is going to be a long process. It could be tempted to do intense designs, but that is quite expensive, so we're just going to do them normally. Once we have that front wing here, we're going to make another one. This is going to be the final underfloor for at least the time being. So we're getting very closely to the final edition of this car. final early edition of this car. Team Hub has been upgraded to level 3, and again, we have a ton of money because of the upfront cash and the fact that we get 2 million now, for the most part, for every race that's up to the end of the season. So we're going to go ahead and upgrade the Team Hub again. We could probably also do the race sim, but it's a little bit more expensive, and we need to have a little bit of money on our hands. As you can expect, these upgrades are going to now help with boosting the mentality of both our staff and our drivers. Next up, we are going to go ahead here and make that front wing. It's not going to be the final edition, but it is going to be a huge upgrade. So we're going to make 2 of these to have into Suzuka. And we're also going to go ahead now and make that final underfloor. Again, we're going to rush one of these because while it is not a huge upgrade, because we, didn't use too much, we didn't have too much CFD to use, it's still going to be a nice little boost for next race. Next up, we are going to start the signing of the final front wing. Remember, we've got about 100 or so from the initial one. Let's see what the second one is going to give us here. And again, as you can see already, we're kind of minimizing the losses compared to earlier. And as we turn this down to 2 stitches, or 2 to 4 like we did last time, we're now up to 126, 34, 08. We now have positive tire preservation, and the dirty air tolerance is close to the same. Now, we're going to still rush this one because it's kind of an important upgrade to get. And at this pace, we're going to get it before we go into Miami, which is going to be nice to have, really. Now, as we did with the chassis, we're going to do the same here with the side pods, where we kind of focus drag reduction and the airflow front. In order to do kind of basically a development side pod, we want to try and get a little bit of that top speed back that we have sacrificed. That's going to help us out long term. Again, we're just going to do it normally. We're not going to be using this. It's basically just for the expertise gain. So we're going to be doing 2-3 of those before we actually make one that we'll put on the car itself. Next up, we are going to get our rear wing tomorrow, I believe. Just going to double check. Let's see, we are at here. Yep, so we're going to get that rear wing. And we're going to rush a couple of these to actually have them for the race itself. And with this, we're going to get another boost to that medium speed cornering, making us decidedly first. So that should be good for next race too. Next up, we are going to make a suspension where we focus more on the top speed aspect. And this is basically what we do after making the initial piece. We make a new suspension where we focus on the drag reduction. And we're going to lose a little bit of cornering and a little bit of that tire preservation. But getting 0.6 worth of top speed, or 0.60 kph worth of top speed, is going to be worth it. So here we are. We are now ready to head into Suzuka, and we have also gone ahead here and upgraded a few things. Namely, we now have 1 new underfloor that again we're going to benefit Hamilton with. We also now have the chassis available for Russell, and as you can see, decent chunk of top speed, decent chunk of medium and high speed. Should help him out. And we also have those new front wings that we can put on the cars. We also have those new rear wings that we can put on the car, which even a little bit more solves that top speed issue. And with this now, we have a car that is basically, if we look at Hamilton's, the best car in terms of cornering. We're still lacking a little bit of top speed, but that is fine. And our overall ranking is still 7th, so I think this takes a while to update. Now, if we go analysis route and compare ourselves to the Red Bull, we're basically 1.3 kph behind in top speed. The rest effectiveness leaves much to be desired, but we have a fairly significant advantage in low speed cornering. Also medium speed cornering, and not as big in the high speed cornering, but already here, this is looking like a tremendously better car than what Red Bull has. So as you can imagine, we should be able to fight with them a little bit more. And once we get Hamilton a little bit better buffed in terms of his mentality, he should be able to bring the fight to Verstappen. Now, the other thing that we need to consider at this point is that we have kind of exhausted most of the potential development of our car. We're going to get 0.6 kph from the suspension, which is going to bring us very close to Red Bull. That is, the front wing is going to give us even more low speed cornering, which is going to make us a terror at Monaco, Hungary, any of the other tracks where low speed cornering is king. And once we get a little bit buffy on the side pod and chassis, we're probably going to catch up to the Red Bulls in terms of top speed as well. At that point, we're probably going to have to consider trying to up our DRS delta a little bit. And by then, we should have the best car, no real complaints. So for quali here, we actually had an insane showing where we're almost a second ahead of Leclerc due to rain. So it's not really representative of where the car is compared to, say, Red Bull, as Verstappen also ended up out in Q2 with the best time in Q1, but a terrible showing in Q2. So you can kind of get the idea here that this isn't really the performance of the car, but it gives you an idea that 1-2s are kind of possible. And with rain on Sunday here, we're just going to try and do our best on the race, and then we'll see how we look. But we might do the next race as well, just to kind of hopefully see how we perform in the dry, as that is a better kind of measuring point, honestly. So I just want to break in here because this is also a racing tip that is kind of interesting to consider, and that is the fact that we have created a 22-second gap here. The main reason for this is because we started on a different tire compared to the rest of the grid. The rest of the grid have decided to use inters while we went wets, because the water level when we started the race was 4.6. It's now gone back to inters, and we're probably going to be pitting this lap or the next. And let's face it, we're going to be losing out a little bit here due to, as you can see, pit stops being about 23 seconds. But Hamilton should be able to keep his lead. Russell is going to have to push a little bit harder, and we'll have a tire advantage till the end because of that. Now, generally, though, you will have incidents like this where the track is wet at the start. And keep in mind, the weather is not allowed to change for the first 4 minutes of the race. So even if it starts, super wet, it's going to remain, in most cases, super wet for at least the first 4 minutes. And if you think you can create a pit stop by running, say, a wet tire on full attack during this period while it's still drying, then it's definitely worth it to do so, because you'll have a huge tire advantage over the other teams going into the first stint, and sometimes even you will be able to build an insane gap. Now, you can generally predict what tire the AI is going to use based on what strategy you get in the fourth slot, and for this one we did get to inter strategies, so that was basically our choice. Now we're going to go ahead here and pit Hamilton first and get him in, and we're probably just going to take care of these inters as most as we can. But yeah, just a heads up, you can't really take advantage of wet starts in this game. So yeah, unsurprisingly here, we managed to turn this into a win, and Verstappen is still going to be on the podium after starting 11th or 12th, one of them. So you can kind of get the idea here that Verstappen is the end game boss of this year's game. We also had Leclerc have a bit of an incident. Didn't have any effect on the race itself due to no safety car. But yeah, Verstappen is going to be the end game boss for us. And honestly, at this point, we have kind of achieved what we were supposed to get, second place in the championship. I'm pretty sure if you swim to the end now, you're going to be fairly safe. However, the goal here is to dominate, and to do that, we're going to need to, get Verstappen off of his high horse. And even though he is a good 45 seconds behind this time, it is mainly due to the wet and him having a bad starting position. But with this, we're starting to climb a little bit in the constructors. We could actually already start causing a little problem for Red Bull as we eat another pit stop mistake. And again, one of the reasons why I want to get that percentage as low as possible. And unfortunately, we are paying out quite a bit of money here due to the bonus. So having high race targets does pay out, benefit to deal with that contract issue. Now, with the race win here, we have, a little bit of a better boost due to the fact that we have personal qualifying, race results, that sort of thing, team race results. And if we can keep stacking these, keeping Hamilton enthusiastic shouldn't be a problem. And that's kind of the key here, getting basically this pace consistency up. It's going to make our life a lot easier. And Russell 2 is also now getting a small boost, nothing too significant, as you can see. He still has max adaptability, but that's about it. So we definitely need to get him a little bit further up there too, because now in the same car, he is basically 5 tenths behind, mainly just due to his driver stats. So we need to definitely fix that. We're going to head to China in 11 days and see if we can perform as well there. We might actually try and sim the rest of the season now to just see if the car is kind of good enough for the AI to dominate with it. And I'm still going to go through every single upgrade from here on out. We get our suspension design complete here, and what we can do is go ahead and make it immediately. It's going to be a pretty significant buff to the car, and in 18 days in Miami, it means that we have plenty of time to get it done, get a couple of them done in time. We're just going to do it normally, get 4 of them cooking. Now at this point, you're going to have to make a decision on how you want to spend your design. Generally, what I'm going to do here is just get started on boosting the suspension even further, because the goal here is going to get the suspension into a good place before we use CFD time on it. So we're going to focus on improving basically the airflow front, as well as the medium and high speed, and get a little bit of a bigger boost there once we actually use CFD time. And again, we're not going to be doing the next period, but the period after. So we're definitely going to have to make we're definitely going to have time to make 2 development suspensions before that. That's kind of the goal here with these parts for the most part. The only thing we're going to put on the car at the moment is that front wing. Let's head to China and see if we can get another 1-2 finish, basically. So we simulated Shanghai here, and by the looks of it, we actually got a 1-2. So as you can imagine, at this point, the car is somewhat powerful. I don't know how it went in the sprint. I wanted to sim this weekend to see how it goes. And already you can kind of dominate with this to some degree, I dare say. And looking at the points that we've gained here, I'd say we did well in the sprint as well. We'll check those standings out in a second. And again, at this point, you can, of course, play things manually, but the purpose of this video is just to teach you how to upgrade your car to more or less dominate with Mercedes, as it has been something a few of you in the comments have said have been harder than you anticipated. And again, we are going to keep on upgrading these buildings until they are level 5. We need a couple of more good results here, but as you can see now, with Russell winning there, he now has some good results in the sprint. And again, this is kind of the funny thing with sprints in particular. You can get double boosted. So after sprints, your drivers will usually be very enthusiastic. And in our case now, we have huge buffs to Russell. We have huge buffs to Hamilton. And honestly, it's kind of good for us that they alternate race results, because if one driver wins more than the other, they're actually going to become upset. They're going to lose out mentally. So that is actually a good thing to have happened. Now, we do also have issues, though, like when you sim, you're very likely to get powertrain issues. But for the most part here, we are Mercedes. We have one of the best cars in terms of, or best engines in terms of durability. So it shouldn't be a huge concern. Now, as I mentioned before we go into the next race here, we're going to be putting on this new suspension. We might as well just put it on the first car. And with that, we now, well, this isn't actually representative because there's damage to other cars, but we'll take a look before we go into Miami. But generally here, as you can imagine, we are getting one more competitive. And once this front wing is done, we're going to get another small boost to our performance. But this is basically where things are going to slow down a little bit, because the next boost we're going to get after that is going to be the rear wing CFD. And even that isn't necessarily going to be a huge gain. It's going to just be a small gain that we can benefit from. Yeah, as you can see, this new front wing, another advantage in cornering across the board. We get back some of that dirty air tolerance and tire preservation we lost with the first design. So all in all, it's not a bad thing to make at this point. Now, we have also spent a lot of money on rushing these designs initially, so our cost cap is down to 60 million, which means that we need to slow down a little bit here and take care of our money. Research is also open here, so as you can see, we're getting a -10 loss to everything next year. So at this point, you might also want to slow down a little bit, do a little bit more research. You can, of course, develop the car further if you really want to dominate. But I say once we get halfway through the season here, going full research is worth it. And maybe even not using CFD on the sidepod, suspension, but just doing research instead. We're still going to do a little bit more development though. But as I said here, front wing, rear wing, underfloor, we're not really going to do much with them. Even if we were to make another underfloor design here with, say, top speed, it's not necessarily going to give us a ton of top speed. Have I forgotten to put on that new underfloor on car 1? I think I have, and that is why it looks so scary. Let's just double check there, because if so, yeah, it's basically it. So there we go. Let's do this right. So even if we were to do another underfloor here with top speed focus, it's not going to give us a ton of performance. As you can see, we're going to end up losing a chunk of cornering. We're going to lose a little bit of top speed. So we probably need to do 2 and 3 iterations of this to get any performance out of it. Instead, what we're going to do is actually just start doing some research for next year. We're losing 10% in everything. Of course, you can have other regulation changes that might be kinder to you. But 10% to everything is going to be a little bit rough for us. So we need to do a couple of iterations of basically every part to fight that. Chassis in one day. Again, we're going to probably still do a couple of development pieces, which is, again, what I just call designs that we do not intend to use. And it's purely there to improve our expertise and to make the next part better. So after this first development piece, as you can see, we're gaining a lot of cornering, we're getting a little bit of top speed, getting a little bit of that DRS and energy cooling back. And we're probably going to do 2 more of these pieces before we actually make one that we put on the car. And again, just going to focus DRS delta energy cooling for this one. And then we'll probably do airflow middle and drag reduction for the last 2. We're going to do the same for the side pod, again, in 5 days. So we'll just take a look at that. And I'm probably not going to focus too much on the development pieces because this video is already very long. So do keep that in mind. ATR is starting today, which also means that we are not going to develop the side pod immediately. We're going to do the rear wing, as mentioned. So the side pod development is going to be put on hold for a little bit. Schumacher has had a performance loss. Shame. And our helipad is now level 5. Good. But yeah, we are going to get that rear wing in a second. Now here is the initial rear wing design, and we've actually maximized the RS delta along with everything else. And honestly, if you really want to, you can actually do something like this where you get a little bit of a boost to all 3 of your downforces, drag reduction, and the RS delta. But it's going to spread your stats out a little bit more in the rear wing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing for us right now because our car is already somewhat good. So what we can do is do something like this. We sacrifice the low speed, we get a little bit of boost DRS, drag reduction, and high speed, as well as medium. And we're going to do this with the full CFD time, as I mentioned. Now, this is probably going to be the last piece that we rush for the season, but honestly, we just saved 9 days. And right now, we don't need to rush this. We're going to have it before Canada, which is kind of the good thing. We aren't going to use this thing in Canada, though. And again, getting that DRS effectiveness up isn't necessarily a positive thing, because again, how the car performance is calculated for, EC money. But on the other hand, we are going to go ahead and boost a little bit, but we're probably not going to be using this rear wing, but we're going to be using the second one, which we make after the CFD has run its course. So our last day showing in Miami was pretty bad with the 9 for Hamilton as his fault has escalated. And that's kind of the issues that we are facing with simulating a lot of these races, is the fact that force will escalate easily. Also, in terms of the car right now, if we go to, Russell's car, which we're on, we're now the 3rd best car in terms of top speed, which means we're just behind the Red Bulls. We also have amazing cornering in all 3 aspects. And really the only thing that we're lacking at this point is that DRS effectiveness a little bit. But again, we're still rated as the 7th best car. So that is a little bit interesting. Now, as you can see, for most of these races, we are expected to perform very well, with the Austria being the exception, as that is a DRS and also, top speed heavy track. But for the majority of these tracks here now, we should be performing fairly decently. And again, a lot of the DRS effectiveness is crucial. But let's face it, DRS effectiveness is only crucial when you're behind another car, so it doesn't really have a huge impact on, everything. However, it might seem like there's kind of a glitch currently where DRS effectiveness does actually impact just the pace of your car in the DRS zone, even when it's not open, which would be a weird thing. But I've seen my cars just slow down so tremendously sometimes that it might be the case, and we might actually need some DRS effectiveness to kind of combat that, but I'll take a look at that later. Now that we're just going to continue simming through these races and see how we perform. And honestly, generally, as a general rule of thumb, you'll perform better if you take manual control than when you sim. So we can sim through the rest of the season and dominate. You should be able to do so with relative ease if you take manual control. Keep in mind, this is on hard difficulty. Italy offers us another 1-2. After Italy, we also get our development suspension. And again, we'll have to make a decision on if we're going to be, using CFD on suspension or not. But for now, that's a choice that can actually wait until we get there. We're also going to go ahead here and upgrade the team hub to its maximum level, which means that we get down to 20 million on our cost, which is kind of bad. But that should help the mentality aspect quite a ton. And again, mentality is just incredibly powerful at the moment. So it makes sense to take advantage of buildings to kind of boost it even further. And again, just look at Hamilton here and tell me it's not worth it to spend a little extra money to get temporary buffs. But yeah, car performance is an issue that we'll have to deal with at some point. And we are getting to a point now where we are getting failed components. But again, it's not a financial problem. The main issue that we're going to have is things like the ERS picking up damage. But as you can see, even Russell with a 28, with ERS damage, with a 34 gearbox, he's capable of winning at this point at certain tracks. So do keep that in mind. It's not completely detrimental. You can still deal with it pretty nicely here. But yeah, onto the suspension. The goal here is going to be to keep on developing another suspension for the end. And again, we're just going to focus a little bit mainly on, the 3 things that we kind of want from it. And we're probably going to go ahead and do one more suspension, and then we'll make a decision. Now, genuinely here, this is kind of a waste of money if we don't actually make one for the car itself. But it should still be acceptable to, again, just make some development pieces. It shouldn't, destroy you in any way, shape, or form. Now that we're going to head into Monte Carlo, Monaco, and there we should hopefully see another 1-2. So some weird stuff is happening here. Hamilton won, but everyone else has been lapped. I want to see the replay of this race. That's the next thing they need to add, a replay for the races. Sorry for getting a little bit carried away, but another 1-2 in Monaco, kind of like we expected. And honestly, it's looking amazing at this point for our team. We're going to get a lot of things done now, with the underfloor research being the first one. And honestly, what we're going to do here is just do another underfloor research because we kind of need to. Underfloor is still going to be very powerful, but we might save a CFD period by just focusing on the underfloor research early on. So that is what we'll do. We're also going to get the second chassis edition done now. We'll take a look at if we want to make a final design right now, or if we might want to make one more development design before we make an actual usable one. And to check that, what we need to do is maximize the two stats we care about. And while this would be kind of nice to have on the car at this point, I think we do one more development design to make it really, really worth it. And there's two reasons why I'm saying that. Number one, we still have the chassis that we've already made. And what I mean by this is that if we go into our warehouse, we still have these chassis. And once they start, degrading fully, that's when we can make a development design. Honestly, making a development design right now would actually benefit us. But basically, we want to try and use up these chassis as much as possible before we, make a new set, if you will. Now, Russell has also gotten some damage now to his gearbox and engine, which we're going to be switching this next race. And we have already done that for Hamilton after this damage because it was early on, but we are probably going to end up using that gearbox towards the end anyways. Yeah, Russell's going to see some changes to his components after practice, and they have fixed the ERS bug, so you can freely change things as you see fit. Now, the rear wing that we have made is not one that we're going to use. This is the one that we're going to use, so let's go ahead and get that one put together. And already, as we can see here, this is actually already a very, very nice gain. Not really in terms of top speed, but we do get some DRS effectiveness, boosting us at least up to the top 10 teams. And we also get a little bit of cornering, a little bit dirtier. So all in all, I'd say this is kind of worth it. And we are going to be trying to get this probably... I think getting it before Silverstone might be a bit of a stretch. But it is doable, actually, with just the engineers. So getting it before Silverstone is actually going to be pretty good. And there we go. Final rear wing underway. Suspension is going to be done in 22 days. Again, another development one. But for now, let's go to Canada, see if we can keep the good form of 1-2s going. In Canada, we had our first big incident as Hamilton still wins, 16 seconds out of Verstappen, but Russell is down in 18th and he's 4 laps down. So I assume he's picked up some sort of damage, or maybe his ERS is straight up imploded. But we're pretty close now to catching up to Verstappen, and in the constructors, we have a healthy 60-point lead. So at this point, we're already doing very, very well. And if it weren't for Russell's incident here, we might have actually caught up to and overtaken Verstappen. So let's take a look at Russell's car. What has happened? So yeah, his ERS has completely combusted, and he's actually DNF'd because of that. At least you would have expected him to. But it is what it is. We'll just have to give him a new one. And that's probably one of the issues that we run into, where we do need new parts over the course of the year. But again, it is what it is. It's not a big deal. And once again, just go through your parts like this. Make new ones when you need to. It's not really a huge concern. I think we'll still wait with the chassis because they aren't actually in any danger. But what happened here with Russell is straight up, he had a yellow fault before going into the race. And as we said, it has developed into a major one. And then a terminal one, because I don't think he's picked up any other sort of damage. So it's just an unfortunate situation. In Spain, we come in second and third, as we are just a couple of seconds behind Verstappen. So Verstappen is still, again, just a monster. And you can kind of see this by Perez being down to 7th. So mentality-wise, we're still doing good. We're going to definitely win the Constructors, see if we can keep this up. The question is just, can we actually beat the monster that is Verstappen? So this is something that is important to mention, that this currently they have fixed contracts, can offers, but as a result, they introduce another bug. And that is that even if you sign a contract with someone else, unless it is an immediate contract, you are most likely going to lose your... Someone else is going to basically outbid you, even though the contract has been signed and you have paid like the sign-on bonus. So in Mercedes, you're going to have 5 people's contracts ending the first year, and we're just going to renew everyone. And the way that you can do this, at least while this bug is still active, is by... Let's see. Apparently, I'd already negotiated with that man. Fine. Is it that I have not negotiated with? Is it Allison? Nope. Yeah, I'll show I'll show you what you need to do. I'll just need to find the contract. So as you can see, this is Murphy's contract, and it's about to run out this year. You can see he only has 5 months remaining. Generally, the AI will start to look for new staff to pick up around the summer break. So as long as you do this when you get the warning in early June or late June here, around Austria, you'll be fine. You can still do the lump sum bonus kind of cheese, and that's kind of what we're doing here. We're just going to give him a contract for 5 seasons immediately, pay him a bunch of money, and also give him a bunch of buyout fee. And we kind of have to do this because if I do this next season, I can avoid the buyout fee, but in theory, the AI can buy him out of his contract. That is the theory, and also seems like the AI isn't really paying for it. However, if we do this and get him onto a new contract for 5 years before the AI starts their poaching season, we should be fine from a contract's perspective. It's just something you need to keep a heads up on. It is a weird bug, so it's very kind of important that if you want to keep your staff, you need to just get on it very early, and you are probably going to be paying 4 to 5 million just in sign-on bonuses and contract breaks, but it should ensure that the AI does not, pick up any of your staff. We also need to replace Lewis at some point because we're going into second season. That isn't really as huge of a problem. We just got the suspension design done, and with that we can now make another one, and we actually do have CFD time. And honestly, we're going to use the CFT time on developing the suspension because Verstappen is, again, just a little bit of a monster. Now, the last 2 CFT periods is going to be used on probably our front and rear wing research, so do keep that in mind. This will basically be the final piece that we do with, developing any piece. Now, we're going to put 6 engineers on this. Once we get them available, they're still working on that rear wing, which will be done in a week. But for now, we are going to head off and started with the Austrian GP. We did have a random event that slowed down all of our projects by a week, so we're not going to actually get this one for Silverstone, unfortunately. So in Austria, which was expected to be a terrible track for us and a great track for the Red Bulls, we actually do first and third, so a pretty good result. And also Norris nabs fastest lap, which is not a huge deal. But still very close within touching distance of Verstappen. And as you can see here, Hamilton did not do well during the sprint at all. And that is a little bit of an issue. Might need to go back and look at the sprint results. But we are, again, very, very much in charge of the constructors. It's just if we can topple Verstappen's reign. Our underfloor research has finished, and we're going to do one more, which, unless I'm mistaken, should be about enough to actually cover that 10% loss that we are getting. Like, it might say that we're getting 2% gains, but if we go to the boardroom here, check the rules and regulations, again, the research numbers that you see aren't really representative. You need to see here how much you're losing, and then check how much you're gaining. So we're still losing a little bit of medium, a little bit of top, a little bit of everything really, but we're getting close, and 1 or 2 more research projects should be it for the underfloor. So the rear wing design is complete here, and with that we now have our final one. Unfortunately, because of the fact that this is race day, we're not going to be getting it for the race itself. We are not going to be emergency manufacturing anything if we can avoid it. It's just way too expensive, but it would be a nice little buff here, and we're going to go ahead and manufacture one immediately, or rather we're just going to manufacture 4, because that is the number that we're going to need. And we are going to get back now onto the side pod. We still want to make a little bit of a buff on the side pod here. And the best way to do that is probably to make one more for development. And then we can actually make a proper one. Now, if we were to make this one right now, for instance, without the cooling, which is kind of what we need, it would still be good. We'd still get 71 kph, which would probably boost us to the top of the grid. We lose a little bit of cooling, lose a bit of cornering. I think what the play here is that we do one more for the development's sake, and after that, do one that's going to be the final edition. So let's go ahead here, make one more of these. We are down to just 40 million, about halfway through the season. So financially, it's not looking amazing, but it's still a very, very acceptable result. And also, we'll be making the final chassis design after Silverstone. In Silverstone, we have our high and we have our low. Russell wins. We have Lewis down in 10th, which I assume is an issue, as he qualified in first. But yeah, Verstappen is still going to be an issue. Pit-stop-wise, we did well, but yeah, something definitely happened to Hamilton, and I can only assume there's some sort of issue with the car. So we're going to take a quick look at it now, before we go to the last race of the season. The sign is also finished. Let us take a look at cars here, figure out what the problem is. And it seems like there wasn't actually a problem. Just a bad race from Hamilton. And they do happen, unfortunately. Down in 10th, probably locked up, got stuck by another cars. Who knows? Gearbox and ERS limit. I would love that change. Yeah, chassis design is complete here. Let us go ahead and design the final edition one. And again, we're just going to do what we did last time. Focus on drag, focus on airflow middle, lower everything else. And while this won't be a huge improvement, it'll be one that will help us in the long run. That's kind of the important part. Now also here, as you can see, we have Budapest, Spa, and then we have Sandboard in 46 days. So I forgot about Hungary there for a second. We can speed up development a little bit, and we'll get it done by the time we go into Sandboard for sure. Now, besides that, we're probably going to need to manufacture a new one. That's not a big deal. And yeah. Side pod, once this one's done, we're going to make a competitive one. And after we made a competitive one and done the second suspension, we're just going to research for the rest of the year. In Hungary, we end up 1st and 5th. Our CFD suspension is done, and this is what our final edition is going to look like. 30 kph, a little bit of cornering, a lot of tire preservation to the point where we can actually sacrifice some for performance if we want to. But honestly, being able to have more control over the tires is not necessarily a bad thing. This is what we're going to go for, and it's going to take us a little bit of time to get it made. But we should have it by the end of summer break, and worst case scenario, Monza will be its first showing. Russell continues his good performance here with another win in Belgium, and Hamilton comes 3rd. So we might actually end up losing to Verstappen due to the fact that our drivers are squabbling a little bit. But Hamilton should have a fresh engine after summer break, and that should help him out a little bit. 100 points up now on Red Bull. Our chassis design is complete, and we're going to go ahead and make it, and we'll have it ready for Sandworth with ease. Now, at this point, we are getting to the point of the season where we're just going to be focusing research, and that is exactly what is going to happen. Now, CFD time is going to get in 34 and 40, or 30, sorry. CFD time is going to be given in 34 days, and that's what we're going to be using to get front wing and rear wing basically caught up with research. So we're going to start doing the chassis, and again, we're losing a little bit of everything here, so honestly, for the chassis, we're going to sacrifice the DRS delta first and get everything else up, and then we can get back that DRS delta a little bit later. But yeah, it's a 10% across the board here, so nothing too serious. And we're going to go ahead also and put some engineers on the suspension. And we're going to put this extra engineer on the side pod. We need to get it done quickly with these two parts. And once they're done, we're just going to do research for the rest of the year. And honestly, I'm going to skip the research projects from this point forwards because, for the most part, they aren't going to be really representative of your save. And that's kind of the important part. The final sidepod design before we make the proper one is done, and with this we are going to go ahead and make the final edition sidepod that we'll be using for the remainder of the year. And this one should be pretty straightforward and simple. We do get a lot of top speed, we do lose a little bit of cooling, we do lose a little bit of medium and high speed. The top speed gain should be more than worth it to compensate, so we're going to go ahead and get this done. And we're just going to put 2 engineers on it. We're not going to really rush it, even if we get it in 30 days. We're still going to get it before Baku, which is kind of where we need it. Would be nice to have a Monster too, perfectly honest, but that should be a-okay for the side pod. And we can move some engineers over when we get our suspension done in 9 days' time. And we'll even have a suspension ready for Sandvoort, but even then, I don't think it's something that we need to stress with. As we get ready to go into the Dutch Grand Prix, we can now equip both cars with the new chassis. We can go ahead and double check that we have everything equipped. Looks like it. We have one new suspension that we're going to be fitting onto Russell's car because he's the one that has been performing lately. And if we take a look now at Russell's car himself, still 1st in cornering, 1st in tire preservation, 3rd in top speed, we're 11th in dirty air, and 9th in DRS effectiveness. And the car is still judged to just being the 8th best car on the grid. So yeah, or 7th. There's still something funky going on there. Now, analysis-wise, we are basically now, with the final edition car, we're still going to get a side pod, let's be fair. But we're getting very closer to the end, and we are going to catch Red Bull in terms of top speed by the end of this. We still have huge cornering advantages across the board. And with this, I think we are going to just speed along now, because we are going to just fire through the last races. This video has been quite long, but we're just going to focus on the race results mainly, and I will stop and we will compare once we get that side pod. But now we're just going to focus on getting through this and seeing how we perform for the last How many is it? Last 10 races? Let's see how we do. At Verstappen's home race, Russell wins, and we have Hamilton coming in third, fourth and fifth for the balls, and looks like Russell might actually be snatching a win here ahead of Hamilton. But yeah, we are doing very, very well. At Italy, Russell gets another win. Verstappen comes second, Hamilton comes third. In Baku, Hamilton wins while Russell falls down to 7th. We have Verstappen down in 8th, which gives us again, a very interesting end to constructors. 3 points between Verstappen and Russell. Hamilton is charging and catching up at this point. So with Hamilton storming and it being his last season, we're going to be a little bit cheeky and give him that new suspension. Sorry, not suspension, side pod. We finally have one done. And with that, our car is now looking to be the quickest car around. We are losing a little bit up in cornering to, our teammate, because we do lose a little bit of cornering to get that top speed. We're now the fastest car in both cornering and top speed as we go into the last few races here. We also did pick up damage for Russell last time, which is why I finished the lowest it did. But we have the components to replace that, so that's not really going to be an issue. Good run continues in Singapore with Russell winning and Hamilton coming in second. And as you can see now, we finally take charge of the constructors, or drivers rather than the constructors. And we still have extended that gap to Red Bull even further. At the US Grand Prix Coda, we have Hamilton winning and Russell coming in second. 6 points now differentiating here. 5 points with the sprint results. So yeah, we don't really do well in sprints by the looks of it. But yeah, 14 points now between our boys. We are getting a healthy lead here on Verstappen. Run continues in Mexico with Hamilton winning, Russell coming second, Verstappen taking a penalty, and then getting a blinder. 6 points now separating our boys. In Brazil, we have Norris winning, Hamilton comes second, and I would assume Russell has picked up some sort of damage here as he's out of the points. With that though, Hamilton takes the lead and we are basically safe from Verstappen to some degree with just a few races remaining here, 3 of them. We have over 200 points to Red Bull, so everything is looking good. But we'll have to see if Russell can make a comeback. 3 races remaining, Hamilton 10 points in the lead. Let's see what happens. So unfortunately for Russell here, he has picked up major damage to his gearbox, and that's probably going to be the end of his championship attempt. Simply due to the fact that we don't have money. We have 5 million remaining in the cost cap, and we have just about enough that we can survive without getting into trouble. So, while it sucks, we are unfortunately here gonna have to try and survive with this ERS only. Buying him another one would be beneficial, but at that point, Hamilton might need one as well. To be fair, Hamilton should be safe. So, we'll take a risk here. We're gonna pick up a new ERS for Russell, even though really financially we can't afford it. It's what's going to bring us over the cost cap, and since we are safe in the constructors at this point, I would really not have done this, but the boys have a pretty close fight at the moment, so let's have them fight it till the end. In Las Vegas, Hamilton wins, Russell takes 3rd place, bringing him back into contention with that ERS penalty. Should be quick in the last couple of races here, and Verstappen has picked up some sort of damage.
Drivers' Championship. This is a very special moment. Winning title number 7.
So as you can see, we got title number 7 according to them. But yeah, 1-2 here in Qatar. It's enough that in the driver championship now, Russell can't catch him before the end of the year. We'll give him a fighting chance, let's be honest, but it just wasn't enough. We also have got closer to breaking 900 points. It's not anything amazing, but if you consider Verstappen, I think we can be happy with the current play here. To be fair, we have won 17 other races this season. We're probably going to win the last one as well. So I'd say it's a very, very dominant performance so far. Now, financially, we are going to breach the cost cap just slightly, but that isn't going to be a huge deal. But for now, let's just get through the last race, and then we'll do a little bit of a review before we end this video. Here we are, end of the season. Russell takes one more win, and we end up with another 1-2. Red Bull has kind of fallen apart, and I think it is a bit of a mentality debuff for the most part. I would think, honestly, judging by how the season has gone for them, with how powerful or strong they were at the start, and how they've kind of fallen off right now. But yeah, this is basically a quick, not really quick, it's a pretty long video. It's basically a way you can dominate with Mercedes in your first year. And again, it's basically just due to the fact that we have built a car that is focused on mainly its cornering. And once you have gotten as much cornering as you can out of the parts, start getting a little bit of that top speed back as well. Now, because of the fact that it's the end of the year, the car attributes aren't really, relatable. I should have checked this before the last race. But we have definitely made a car that is very, very strong. And all they've done is go up one place in the ranking to 6 and 7. So yeah, there is something there with the mentality, and car rating doesn't seem to actually be, reliable estimate of car performance. If you're unhappy with winning a championship in a car, then I'd say you either have an incentive, you basically believe you are the best driver ever, or again, it doesn't make sense for these guys to be unhappy with the car, is what I'm saying. So I hope that gets fixed. Now, you are going to have to replace Lewis at the end because he has a contract where he is going to Ferrari. And let's be perfectly honest here, nothing we do here is going to, make us get him back. 35 million, just a breakout there would be amazing. We're not going to be paying that termination cost, or rather, break contract cost. This has been a quick guide, again, on how to get Mercedes into a dominating position. It's going to work for most teams, the development path. However, if you have less money, you're probably going to have to do it in a bit of a slower way. You can't rush as many projects. You're just going to have to run them standard. But with Mercedes, we made this work just about. And yeah, we didn't breach cost cap, but it has limited our ability to do a little bit of research. The fact that we need to buy a new ERS. So while we did this, we stayed just about within the cost cap, capabilities here. We have spent about 50 million on research this season. And if we take a look at the rules and regulations, suspension, we have lost out a little bit. Couldn't actually get enough research going there. The underfloor, we have done actually a little bit too many projects on, as you can see, but that's not a terrible thing. Side pods, we lose out a little bit. Basically, would like at least 1 or 2 more projects. Rear wing hasn't actually been brought up yet, but we did use a CFD project on it. So there should be some gains there. It's because it isn't done. But yeah, we used the CFD, so honestly, it should be kind of relatable if you see what the front wing gains are. So losing a slight amount somewhere, but we're gaining for the most part. And we should be seeing similar numbers for the rear wing, and for the chassis, we have beaten the research requirements. So all in all, been a pretty good season, but of course, research is kind of hard. It's going to be highly dependent on what kind of regulations you get. With that said, I hope you've enjoyed this, dominate with Mercedes video. Did one last year, this year too. Luckily for this year, we could sim. And if there is some issues with audio in this video, let me know. I had my microphone give up on me twice during recording of this. I'll try and go through it while I edit, but I might miss something like a small cutout, and I have no idea what is causing it currently, which has probably, delayed this video by a good 6 hours or so, while I've been just kind of troubleshooting and trying to solve this issue, which is kind of sad. But yeah, thank you for watching. Hope to see you next time. I'm probably going to be streaming on Tuesday, tomorrow. I don't know if I'm getting this video out on Monday or if it's going to come out on the day that I'm mentioning streaming, Tuesday. Probably around the same time as I have been. And we'll take a look at Season 2 and kind of dive a little bit deeper into the AI development and see if they actually are giving you a challenge now. According to Mike, they are still kind of, bad at it. But we'll see what we see. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoy. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.